Welcome to New Rechts, or for our English listeners, New Right. My name is Daniel de Liever, and today we're going to talk about the German politics. And I'm glad today to talk to the member of the European Parliament for the Alternatief voor Duitsland, dus the alternative for Germany, Christine Anderson. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
And a lot is going on in the world, but I think also in Germany, definitely we have seen many changes, especially also with the rise of the AFD. But before we go into AFD itself, maybe you can tell a little bit more about your background for people that don't know much about you.
Well, my political engagement or motivation, if you want to call it that, pretty much started when I was even a kid. I was always interested in politics. I grew up in a family where my father, he was highly interested in politics. That probably had something to do with the fact that he had been imprisoned. My parents both used to live in GDR, the former German Democratic Republic. And he was sentenced to 25 years of hard labor to one of the most horrific political prisons you can imagine, Bautzen. Luckily, he only had to serve five of those years. And they arrested and tried and convicted him pretty much because he was insisting on using his right of freedom of speech, right? So that's pretty much how I grew up, with the understanding you're always critical of your government. You never take anything they tell you for granted, and you always question everything they're doing. So, yeah, I've been a critical mind. And ever since I was eligible to vote, I voted for the Christian Democrats, which is the former conservative party in Germany, and for the Freie Demokratische Partei, the FDP, the former liberal party in Germany. And I voted like that up until 2005. And then I no longer could. By waking up moment with 2007. There was the subprime crisis in the United States that actually prompted me to was like, what is going on here? So, 2009, I voted invalid because not going to vote is not an option. If you're not casting your vote, you're actually rewarding those who you're trying to punish by not going to vote. So I voted invalid. In 2013, I heard some TV show that we're talking about a new party being just about to become about. They were critical of Euro, critical of the EU institutions, and I'm like, whoa, what is this, right? And I was so glad to have finally found a party again that I felt represented by, and I decided, well, this time I'm not gonna depend on others to do the right thing. I needed to get involved myself. And I became a member of that party, and here we are today.
That's a great introduction. Thank you. And it's in a sense ironic then when AFD, for those that don't know, like you said yourself, became famous in the first part for being a Euro-critical party, but now you are yourself a member of the European Parliament. So how has this been, this experience since 2019 to be there in a political system that you, and I guess the AFD in general, has been so critical of?
Well, the thing is this. I mean, I knew it was going to be bad. I had no idea that it was going to be that bad. So, I mean, just looking at the EU institutions, you know, how they interact, it's not only undemocratic, it's downright anti-democratic. And the thing is just this, that's by design. So it's not like they made a mistake back then when they drew up the contracts on how the EU institutions are going to be functioning and interacting with each other. It wasn't a mistake they made. It was by design. What they're trying to achieve, and they're quite successful, unfortunately, is to remove the democratic processes further and further away from the people, to a point where the people no longer even know who is responsible for what decision and who can they hold accountable for any decision that has been made. So that's pretty much how the EU institutions are working here, obfuscating their goals, always gaslighting people, manipulating people into thinking we're doing this just for your own good. No, they're not. They're serving other interests, but it's definitely not the interests of the peoples in the member states.
And I think for a lot of people, it's quite difficult to actually understand the European political system because it's been made, I would say, unnecessarily complicated, right? So if you want to follow it and you already have a normal life, it seems almost impossible to actually know what's going on.
Yes, but that also is by design. People are not supposed to understand politics anymore, you know, how decisions are actually being made. But that is just one part of their attempt to, like I said, remove the democratic process away from the citizen. You know, just take this one example. On EU level, there is no division of power anymore. Division of power is one of the principles that a democracy is supposed to be built on. So you have three branches: executive, legislative, and judicative. But it's intermingled. So the body that is actually passing legislation on EU level is the so-called council. And they're passing the laws on EU level. It's not the EU Parliament. All we're doing is we're voting on resolutions, which is like, you know, like a nice term for like a beggar's letter. We are writing to the Commission, hey, it would be nice if you could do this, that, and the other. And if they don't, they don't, right? They don't have to act on it. So, but the council is actually passing the legislation on EU level. And the council consists of the members of the national executive. So this is highly concerning. Like I said, you don't have the division of power anymore. And how would that actually work? Let's say, for example, the German government, they wanted to pass a law in Germany, right? So they introduced it to the Bundestag. And the Bundestag, if they actually were to do their job and were to act in the best interest of the German people, they looked at this piece of legislation and said, well, no, that's not, we don't want this. So they'll vote for it. So meaning in Germany, this law now does not get passed because the Bundestag didn't vote for it. Well, but now all the minister has to do is to travel to Brussels, discuss it with his colleagues from the other member states, and they pass it there, right? Then it goes back to the Bundestag, and since it's now coming from the EU, they have to put this into law in Germany. They're required to do so. So in essence, what we're talking about here is that the sovereign of Germany, the German people, are simply being pushed aside. They're being overruled by these bureaucrats here in Brussels. And another principle, the very foundation of any democracy, is the rule of the people, for the people, by the people. But when the people are being pushed aside, who is ruling? It's not the people anymore.
It's a good point. We see the same thing, I guess, in every European state. We have the same thing in the Netherlands, of course, where I'm from, where we have the so-called most right-wing government now, with the party of Geert Wilders, the PVV, the biggest party, but not much of the policy that they've been chosen on, like, for example, stricter immigration policies actually being able to pass because Brussels wants differently. So I think a lot of Dutch people would also recognize this problem. And I'm quite curious if we now specifically talk about AFD, especially in the, let's say, the mainstream, primarily left-wing media. There's, of course, a lot of negativity around AFD. So maybe we can start by you clarifying what in your, from what you're hearing in the media, what are the biggest misconceptions that there are about AFD as a party?
Well, the biggest misconception is that they are accusing us of trying to abolish freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. And they're framing us in such a way that we are attempting to erect a totalitarian, authoritarian regime. But the contrary is true. It's the so-called old parties. They are trying to actually establish a totalitarian regime. And you can see it If you followed what's happening in Germany, if anyone calls a minister a moron, just posts a meme depicting him as a moron, then the police will ring at your doorbell at 6 a.m. in the morning. We have alternative media being shut down by the Minister of the Interior. It backfired horribly on her. A court overruled that decision. And the latest, just 2 days ago, a journalist, he's actually the head of that paper, he posted a meme of the Minister of Interior holding a sign which read, "I hate freedom of speech." And he was just sentenced to 7 months in prison, even though it was on probationary period. But on what planet would you expect in a democracy a verdict like this, right? So they're utterly desperate to cling to their power. And it's really in an attempt, from their perspective, in an attempt to save democracy, they're actually destroying democracy, right?
Exactly. It's very weird. That is this last case. We also wrote about it today about David Bendel's,
Yes.
and it is crazy indeed. The irony of it all is that indeed that the minister from the Social Democratic minister indeed doesn't like freedom of speech, and she's proving the joke right. This is the most ironic thing. But don't you think also, the thing I'm worried when I see in Germany, but also in other countries like, for example, United Kingdom, there seems to be this lawfare about offending people, right? This is the whole point. If you offend someone, then you should be punished for it, when that's not a principle of any free society, right?
No, it's not. I mean, what's the point of free speech if not to offend, right? So if you're trying to get a point across, you're going to be using words. They're not nice. But, how will you get anyone to understand what's at stake if you do not sometimes use drastic words? And I mean, this whole conception about no one has the right to not be offended. I mean, there's lots of things that people say to me, and I'm offended by it. That doesn't give me the right to shut them down. Unless it's overstepping, of course, the boundaries that are being drawn within our penal code. But what the German government is doing, they're deliberately and purposefully, seeking to restrict a speech that is below. They're even saying that themselves, that is below the threshold of what would constitute a crime according to the penal code. So they're on purpose going for that. But you're absolutely right. It's not only happening in Germany. It's not only happening in Great Britain or France or the Netherlands or anywhere else. It is happening in every single Western democracy. And that should really spook the hell out of us, right? Just look back at the COVID years. They were literally reading from the same script. They were implementing the same restrictions all over, using the same phrases. No one is safe until everyone is safe, and no jab, no job. Build back better. I mean, they were literally reading from the same script. They were in lockstep, and that is scary. That is really scary. Why is that scary? Very simple. Had it been 1 or 2 or 3 countries going rogue and, kind of imposing these restrictions on fundamental rights and the democratic principles, then, the people could have had the hope eventually another country is going to step in and put a stop to this. But if they're all in lockstep, who do you think is going to come and bail us out? No one. There isn't going to be anyone coming. So it has to be the people themselves. We need to fight this. We really do.
Yes, I agree. Passivity is not really going to change anything, especially sadly, this is only one of the many problems, right? The reason why you need freedom of speech is also to actually address the real problems in the room, no matter if it's about us destroying our economy with climate policy, or the negativity we see around the damage from mass migration, Islamization. There are quite some issues, of course, and many more. So sadly, there's quite a long list nowadays. I'm also curious. I think one of the things, especially in Dutch media, but I also see it, of course, in other media, is that the AFD is framed as this kind of like extreme right party, especially because it's a German party. Of course, there's always this link being made with Nazis and whatnot. So maybe it's also good if you can address, what do you think of all these accusations that there are, I would say, on a daily basis about AFD being an extreme far right party?
Well, I would just say we were not extreme right. We just have been right so far, right? So this is what we're talking about, but it's ludicrous. It really is ludicrous. I mean, and now it's kind of obvious at this point. The only party being represented in the Bundestag right now that actually tries to not only defend, we're no longer about talking about defending freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. At this point, we need to restore freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. But AFD is the only party doing that. All of the other parties, like I said, in the desperate hope of clinging to their power, they are ready to demolish freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. And if it was just for the sake, so they can keep their positions, they can keep their power. And that is not right. It's not right by the people. A democracy, as I said, it is the rule of the people, for the people, by the people. So the people, they're actually the boss in all of this. And the people get to tell the governments what they want to have done. And the elected government's job is to implement what the people want. But at this point, it's like the government is dictating to the people, right? Look, you're supposed to want this. So, and, you know, when you get to a certain point, as you pointed out, as we got into that question, as you pointed out, the solution can never be to just not talk about problems. Denying problems, not talking about problems will not solve them. It will make them worse. And, you know, this illegal mass migration, which is an invasion at this point, it's not going to go away just because you're not allowed to talk about it anymore. That's ridiculous. And that's actually the hallmarks to forbid the people to touch on certain issues or just to speak certain truth. If you deny them to do that, that actually is the hallmarks of totalitarianism, right? To just, you know, refute or to ignore the evidence in front of your eyes. And there is so many examples of that. So I'm not supposed to, or I'm not allowed to be offended that my country is being flooded with illegals by the millions. In Germany, we're now having 2 brutal gang rapes every single day. Gang rapes, brutal gang rapes every single day. And that is not even counting the rapes where there's only one perpetrator, right? You have these random knife attacks, knife stabbings, like no longer on a daily basis, on an hourly basis. There's 13, 14, 15 every single day. And you never know when you might be the one being the target of that. Anywhere you go, it could happen. So, and I'm not allowed to, or I'm supposed to find that good? No, I don't think so, right? So, next thing, this whole transgender madness. Excuse me? I could be fined $10,000 because I refuse to call an obvious biological man a woman. That's insane. That truly is insane. And like I said, that it bears the hallmarks of totalitarianism.
And I do think that we are seeing in the political arena of Germany, we're seeing this change, right? On the last elections, you became the second biggest party behind CDU-CSU, so the Christian Democrats. And I think today was the first time in the polls I saw you actually are now in the Ipsos polls, you're the biggest party. And I think that's the the first time, I think maybe since the
First time ever.
Yes, so it's the first time also you could say since end of World War II that there is a party that is, you could say, right wing of CDU that is now becoming the biggest party. I think it's kind of very showing that people want things to change, and of course, sadly, we're seeing that there's still this firewall around AFD. What do you think about the fact that even though clearly a lot of people want AFD to become part of a coalition, we're now seeing again Christian Democrats and Social Democrats ruling together?
Well, I mean, just looking at the results of the last election, the people clearly voted for a Christian Democrat AFD coalition. We had the majority. So, but Friedrich Merz, this idiot, really idiot, he had nothing better to do than to, even while we were still campaigning, to let everyone know he will not even speak to AFD, regardless of what the result of the election is going to be. He is not going to even speak to us. By doing so, he pretty much told the Social Democrats and the Greens and the left and everyone else is like, look, I can be blackmailed. You can demand from me whatever you want, and I will have to give it to you because I said I'm not going to even speak to AFD, right? Rather than tell, well, we'll wait the results of the election and then we'll see what we will do. No, he made it clear he wasn't going to even speak to us. So what he effectively did, he made a moron out of himself. And the Social Democrats, and they already have been doing so. In fact, they are expected to release their coalition agreement this afternoon. But from what we've been hearing so far, and it started even before they started the negotiations, that the Social Democrats, they just, blackmailed him, and they just, demanded you need to give this, and this. So Friedrich Merz has pretty much broken every single promise that he had campaigned on. One of which being, oh yeah, he's going to close the border. There is going to be a change in this illegal mass invasion policy. And the same day after the election, he was like, well, no one ever said anything about closing any borders. So he backtracked that, right? Then the other issue he was campaigning on was the so-called debt break, so like the debt ceiling. Yes. And he was very strong advocating that we don't need or can't afford any more debt, right? And again, he broke that promise. Not only did he break that promise, after the election, get this, after the election, they called in the old Bundestag, which technically was no longer in office, called in the old Bundestag to change the constitution, the Grundgesetz, so they could make 900 million, almost 1 billion, up to 1.5 billion actually, in more debt. And he needed to do that with the old Bundestag because the newly elected Bundestag, which they could have called in too, by the way, the AFD and the left party, we would have had a 1/3 blocking minority. So they would not have been able to change the Grundgesetz, right? So, I mean, he did whatever he could to break any kind of promise he ever made to the voters, and they're feeling betrayed, and rightly so. So I don't know where that will lead us, but that's pretty much what is happening, that we are now leading the polls. And on top of all of that is, despite their best effort to stigmatize us, to defame us, to label us as Nazis or whatever, the thing is this, my party is now 12 years old, right? But everything we have been saying from the very beginning, the people are now seeing that we were right. It wasn't fear-mongering. We weren't making this stuff up. So everything we had said was going to happen. If we continue to go this way, this will happen. If we continue to do this, then this will happen. It is now happening, and the people are seeing it and realizing it. And that Yeah, and it explains why we are rising in the polls. And at this point, you know,
Mhm.
maybe we hit the 30 within the next 4 weeks or so. Who knows?
Yes, it is in a sense. It's like you just described yourself. I think at some point there will be new elections, and I think it's very short-sighted. And maybe in the short term, CDU is now able to make sure that they don't have to rule at AFD, but by giving up everything, they're just undermining their own position for
Yeah, they are.
whenever either this
Hmm.
coalition falls or when there are new elections in a few years. So it's
Well,
a crazy situation.
yeah, well, we'll kind of have to wait and see. So, like I said, this afternoon they're expected to yeah, pronounce their
Hmm.
coalition negotiations. You know, the
Hmm.
contract. So we will know this afternoon for sure. But it's scary what has been leaked by now. For example, they actually are thinking. I don't know if that will be in the contract this afternoon, so we'll have to see. But they were
Hmm.
contemplating to abolish the Freedom of Information Act, which is a tool that every citizen can use to ask your government, you know,
Hmm.
what did you do there in that negotiation with this contract, right? So, and the thing that comes to mind with via such a FOIA request, a Freedom of Information Act request, the German people were given or had the Robert Koch Institute, which is the equivalent of the CDC in the United States, which is
Hmm.
supposed to advise the German government based on scientific evidence, but what to do. And that was the claim that
Hmm.
all these COVID restrictions that were imposed on us, they were actually scientifically based. And there was a recommendation from the Robert Koch Institute. But a journalist, Paul Schreier, he petitioned the court. He wanted to see the minutes of the Robert Koch Institute when they had their meetings, and it was denied. So he petitioned the court. He won this lawsuit, so they had to release the minutes. And guess what?
Hmm.
In the minutes, it was quite clear. It wasn't that the Robert Koch Institute had scientifically based evidence and then advised the government. It was exactly the other way around. The government told the Robert Koch Institute, look, we want to impose this restriction, find us a scientific reason for it, right?
Hmm.
So it was exactly the other way around. And now they want to abolish that Freedom of Information Act. Gosh, seriously? In a democracy, the government has to be transparent. They have to be
Hmm.
accountable to the citizens. And, in a regime or in a system where the government is afraid of the people, that's what you call a democracy. But if the people are afraid of government, that's called a tyranny.
Yes, it is. Let's hope that they will not impose this, but that would definitely uh,
I wouldn't
be.
be surprised if they did, though. I really wouldn't be surprised.
Mhm. And I think another big thing that people are surprised of when you look at Germany. Germany has been for a long period of time now the economic powerhouse of Europe, but we see sadly huge economic trouble, even some deindustrialization happening in Germany. What is actually your outlook on the economic situation now in Germany?
Well, it's not looking good. Let me tell you that. So, yeah, as you said, we are an industrial nation. What does an industrial nation need? Power. It needs electricity, right?
Mhm.
Um, and but for some reason, and no, actually, there was a very concrete reason for doing so, because at the other end of the world, there was a tsunami, and a catastrophe happened with one of the nuclear power plants at the other end of the
Mhm.
world, mind you, which prompted Angela Merkel to shut down all of the nuclear power plants in Germany, right?
Mhm.
So this tsunami at the other end of the world destroyed more nuclear power plants in Germany than it did at the sphere where it happened. So yeah, if you shut down your energy supply,
Mhm.
and then on top of it, since Germany is so principled, right? We refused after Russia invaded Ukraine. But I will say that Putin should have never done that. We as a party take national sovereignty very seriously, and you absolutely do not march into another country and bring your weapons along. You do not do that. So, but here we are. He did that. But now Germany was so principled, we refused to take the Russian gas. Because guess what? We were bound by contract to pay the gas, which we refused to take. So we paid Putin for gas that we refused to take. He got paid for that anyway. And that was supposed to hurt him? I think not. So then what did Putin do with the gas we paid for but didn't take? He sold it to India again. So he got paid twice. So, and then we said, yeah, oh, India, you happen to have some gas, we'll buy it from you. So we paid the gas twice, and Putin got paid twice for the very same gas. And that's supposed to be hurting him. So, but here we are. And, just looking at that, you really cannot come to any other conclusion than to say, yes, Germany is governed by idiots at this point, right? So I don't know. We're shutting down our automobile industry. We want to go all e-mobile now. And we're seeing in this house, the disaster it's causing, like Monday nights when we travel to Strasbourg once a month. So then all the cars from Brussels, the official cars for the MEPs, get driven down to Strasbourg. And when they get there, guess what? They're empty. So they're sitting around there. And since they only have two speed chargers in the parliament in Strasbourg, Monday night getting an official car, if you need to go to a meeting or anywhere, good luck with that one, right? It's insane. It's really insane. It's a nut house.
Definitely. And the last question I have for you, of course, this is kind of a dire situation, you could say, because while this is happening, other countries around the world outside of Europe are just, laughing at us, you could say, destroying our own culture, our own economy, our own values. What can people do either in Germany, but also, sadly, we have similar situations all across Europe. What can people do to actually make sure that we can stop the destruction of our own continent?
Well, the number one thing I always tell people: turn off your freaking television set. Seriously, just turn it off and never turn it back on. It is dumbing you down. So, the media, the public media is clearly in the hands of, how shall I put this? They're bought. At this point, they're either corrupt to the core or they are bought by the parties that have an interest in dumbing you down. So turn it off, get your information wherever you want, but do not turn on your television ever again. So that would be the number one. Then inform yourself, read different outlets. Do not rely solely on one source, but kind of diversify your input of information. Come up with your own conclusion based on the information that you have been able to get. And people really need to come back to the understanding what is freedom, democracy, and the rule of law all about. What does it mean? So, and as I said before, I'll say it again now. Democracy is all about the ruling of the people, and the people are our bosses, right? And the people get to tell me what they want me to do. And if I refuse to do it, then they should not elect me ever again. It's really that simple. But unfortunately, the gaslighting, the manipulation, it's working out so well for them. But people really need to get an understanding of what does it mean to live in a democracy.
Thank you so much. Let's hope that things will turn better, and the next time we talk, we have a more positive situation to talk about. If people want to follow your work, where can they do that best?
On Twitter, for example, my handle is kind of weird. It's Anderson AFDMDEP. But if you Google me, you'll just find all my social media accounts.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. And I will say good luck. And let's hope also for the sake of Germany and Europe that things can be changed around.
Thank you so much. And thanks for having me.
Thank you. And of course, I also want to thank all our listeners. If you want to make these kind of conversations possible, please consider subscribing at nieuwrechts.nl and see you in the next one.